On the American scene, there is a great work that has remained curiously unfamiliar to cinema for a long time, and even today there are a few transpositions of it. We are talking about Moby Dick. Mystery has always hovered around this novel. From its protagonist, a white sperm whale that roams like a holy ghost, enormous yet almost invisible to the eyes of those who hunt it, to the work itself, which remains in the shadows, full of senses, ambivalences, and interpretations, yet unexplored, as if people were afraid to face this masterpiece. In fact, the book's reputation even precedes it, but there are still very few film adaptations. This is a mystery that has surrounded this work for a long time, and made me reflect on what makes it so. If we search on Google how many film adaptations of Moby Dick exist, we will find out that the results are surprisingly poor. In the first half of the 1900s, there were two films, The Sea Monster and Moby Dick the White Monster, but they were romantic comedies about Captain Ahab's love life and had very little to do with the original plot. Then what happens after 2000? The situation is bleak. There's 2011's Age of Dragons, a fantasy movie with dragons instead of sperm whales, and 2007's Captain Ahab, a prequel about Ahab's youth. Then we have The Whale, which was broadcast on Britain's BBC in 2013, and Heart of the Sea, which might sound more familiar because it debuted in cinema in 2015 to moderate success, thanks to the iconic lead actor Chris Hemsworth. Both movies have more a modern style and are adventure-centered, but focus on the legend of the Essex, the whaling ship that inspired the story of Moby Dick, rather than the novel itself. In 2010 Moby Dick was released, a 90-minute film directed by Trey Stokes, also available on YouTube. Unfortunately, it was a flop upon its release, and even then, a comparative analysis with the novel is difficult. The plot tells of a modern-day marine biologist who, together with her best friend Queequeg, is hijacked by a giant submarine led by Captain Ahab, who had in turn stolen the vessel from the American forces out of a thirst of revenge against Moby Dick, a not well-categorized mix between a shark and a whale, allegedly of prehistoric origins. There are a few instances of homonymy. See the name of the protagonist, Michelle Herman, which creates an assonance with Herman Melville, and a veiled reference to the archetype that links each character to their original. Unfortunately, this film does not do justice to the rich symbolism and depth of Melville's novel. It is simply a pretext for an action film to the tune of Jaws, with no connection to the original text, full of missiles, nonsense, and fights with a phantasmagorical flying fish at war with the United States. Not a single reference is made to the events of the tale. The characters are not respected, not to mention the script that has nothing to do with the text. Melville's symbolism and myth-filled tale is flattened by banal, logicless repartee. The scientific, geographical, and anthropological research conducted by Melville in his time is totally ignored and replaced by a flat desire for murder and revenge against a megalodon. But above all of the great sacred text that is Moby Dick, not even the character of God, crucial for reading the novel, remains, replaced by a madman's megalomania and the American Navy. It is clear that behind these film productions there was no aim to adapt Melville's work, rather to create entertainment for the audience. As we continue to admire and study the literary masterpiece Moby Dick, the question still remains: is it really possible to adapt this work onto a film? The story of the novel and of its author is fascinating. Cesare Pavese considers it a true sacred poem. From the very beginning, quoting "And God created great whales," to Job's epilogue, "And I only am escaped alone to tell thee." It almost seems as if to read this work one must also have the Bible on one's bedside table. As a child, Melville grew up in the Dutch Reformed Church community, and the influence of the Holy Scriptures really appears in his later novels. But Herman Melville was also a Robinson Crusoe, an adventurer, scholar, stoic, traveling the oceans among cannibal populations, completing his works amidst extreme hardship. So much so that the ideal in Melville culminates in the literate whaler, like Ishmael, like Melville himself, an adventure-seeking sailor who can row with his illiterate colleagues half a day behind a sperm whale, and then retire to the masthead to meditate on Plato. It is in this complex attitude between experience and reason that Melville's image takes shape. Within this background, the 1956 film Moby Dick, the White Whale, directed by John Huston and starring the legendary ensemble of Gregory Peck and Orson Welles, seems to be the only one truly inspired by Melville's tale, and which can be described as a movie adaptation. The film follows the novel closely, from Ishmael's famous opening to Ahab's troubled monologues, to the epilogue, with the Rachel searching for her children lost at sea. You can tell that there has been deep research into sea life and seafaring language. John Huston did a laudable job of letting the voice of nature, of seagulls, whales, and wind mark the rhythm of this film. And he certainly gave great importance to the biblical aspect of the novel. In fact, from the very first scene, it is very clear that we are watching a very faithful adaptation to the text of the book, rich in symbolism. In 2 hours and a half of film, an attempt is made to transpose every single event, and from the point of view of the screenplay, the director pays enormous homage to the author. Many dialogues, if not entire monologues, are taken entirely from the book. This is certainly essential to fully understand the meaning of Melville's work, as well as fascinating. It is delightful to be carried away by the poetics of Moby Dick, which plays on assonances, rhythms, musical melodies, while the characters speak of Greekness and Christianity with a disarming simplicity, bringing back biblical heroes such as Jonah in the belly of the whale, the prophet Elijah, and King Ahab, whose blood is licked by dogs. Huston had of course read the book and grasped the complex essence of the work. However, he ran into the difficulty of translating it into his own words, or rather into screen words. I asked myself a question that I believe to be timely. Given the difficulties of the text itself, the fact that it was written in the 19th century language, when cinema did not yet exist, also given its infinite symbolism, is it really possible to maintain its articulations and references while managing to adapt it to a screen? As much as it is right to faithfully follow the original work, reading a book is not like watching a film. The film is a concentrated juice of the book, which the viewer watches in one go in a few hours at the cinema. The viewer first perceives with sight and emotion rather than with reason. In a book like Moby Dick, which has over 700 pages, there is time to dwell on zoological and spiritual digressions. In a film, perhaps not, or not so much. This is why I believe that excessive fidelity to the text played against Huston's film, making it overly acted. It is true that better words than those of Melville himself would not exist, but the film loses its naturalness. The words seem to be copy-pasted on the mouths of the actors, and it also loses the sense of reflecting on each sentence. However, one must also consider that the techniques and the whole acting method of the 1950s are very different from today's standards. Long takes, overly formal language, statuesque and theatrical acting are all part of an old way of filmmaking. A priori, it is a film that in the eyes of millennials sounds slow or overacted, but the hard work of Huston and his actors must be acknowledged, if only from the fact that they were the only ones to embark in such an undertaking. Rather, it is said that this is the only film that can be talked about, and no matter how well researched and thought out, it hardly speaks to today's audiences. At this point, Perhaps it's not just a matter of overawe, but putting such a text on film is a sign of difficulty. In the end, bringing such a dense novel to the big screen is a challenge. Perhaps it really would take a director who also is a poet to capture Melville's poetics and make the work more accessible to modern audiences. What will be the future of Moby Dick adaptations? Remains to be seen. But it is certain that this story will continue to inspire and fascinate generations to come.